Ladies and gentlemen, 7 months ago, this man and I sat down and we made some predictions for what was going to happen this year.
Oh man, we
And
did, didn't
what a
we?
year it's been so far. Keegan and the Smart Canvas Journal, thank you for joining. Everyone who joins on, please, if you have questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comments. We will try our best to answer them. But before we do any of that, welcome back to the Wealth and Wisdom Show. I'm your host, Tyler Crowley, and today we have Brandon Byrne back at it again after a 7 month hiatus.
Hell's yeah. And I'll probably be posting this on my own Awakened Astrology podcast as an episode. So, welcome to everyone listening. Tyler covering the economic perspective, and I'm covering the astrological perspective. And yeah, quite a year it's been. Plenty of talking points to talk about.
Mhm.
What
You
should
know,
we
I
dive
have
right in,
this.
or
We should, but before we do that, Brandon, I have to say,
yeah,
it's been a really interesting format that we've ran here. I think
it has. Yeah,
a
let's
lot of
address that
people,
first.
a lot of people, we we see even in the early days when like I wasn't getting any views on this, people would show up for these shows, and it was so interesting because of how much like obviously because I'm not a big believer in astrology. The first thing that came to my mind was coincidence. There is, but when it happens this often, it feels less like coincidence and more like something else is going on. So
Yeah.
it's been a very interesting format, and I'm so excited that we're back here to do it again because I miss it. I would think about it from time to time. I was like, oh, we used to do like consistent shows together, and then life got in the way. But we're
Yeah,
here
I
now,
know what you
so
mean. Once is a coincidence, three times is more of a correlation. But yeah, no, I think last year, 2025, we definitely had more of a habit of hopping
yeah,
on a live time to time,
for
maybe
sure,
once a month or so.
for sure, for
Um,
sure.
right, I think I was kind of like I had a financial background. At the beginning of 2026, I sort of rebranded my whole newsletter and publication to be a
Mhm.
little less finance focused and a little more astrology focused. Although I think I'm starting to find my sweet spot of like, let's do less finance and more astrology. Maybe that was a bit of an overcorrection, and now we're starting to like find the center, find the balance in that. Um,
No, for
and
sure,
yeah.
for sure. I mean, sorry to cut you off there, but that definitely
Oh
has
yeah,
been
you're
one of the
good.
biggest lessons I've learned from this year is the extremes don't pay. And I don't know about you, but I know for myself this year I've had a habit of overcorrecting pretty hard.
Yeah,
And
it's part of the theme, right?
yeah. So this year's definitely been, I mean, we were talking about this before on the live, this year's definitely, which I think we said back in like 7 months ago when we did it back
Oh
in
yeah.
January when we first did this. Like it feels like this year is a return to contemplation, like a return to self-awareness, the divine, like after all the crazy nonsense that admittedly lasted a lot longer than I thought it would. I thought for sure coming into this year that people would be fed up with AI quicker than they were,
Okay.
but
You were
it
starting to feel
still
that at the beginning of the
happened.
year.
Yeah, it still happened. And I wish I'd gone back and watched our show to see exactly what we talked about to see if we were correct or not, but I didn't have time today. So maybe I'll do a comparison between these two as an article afterwards and we can look through that together. But I feel like, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this one, Brandon. It definitely feels like that theme was correct. This is the year of reflection, the year of kind of that inward turning back towards whatever it is that people choose to center themselves. Which is very interesting. I did not expect that for this year, aside from like the AI thing, but it's gotten so much bigger than that in the past seven
Right,
months,
because
I
I
feel
think
like.
one of our central reasons for hopping alive today is kind of we're seeing less interest in AI these days. That's probably fair to say. And I mean, like, I guess I see what you're saying with like, or what were you saying at the compared to the beginning of 2026 to now versus like seeing the fall of AI, or what were kind of
It
your thoughts on that?
Well, originally I was under the impression that this year was going to be the year that people woke up. And
Okay.
specifically at the time I was saying woke up to the fact that like AI companies are cash burning machines that will never be profitable.
Yes.
But it's gotten so much bigger than that. I mean, some of the stuff we're going to talk about, we're going to be talking about World Cup today. We're going to be talking about Iran and the situation happening over there. Obviously, Brandon's going to share his astrological insights. It seems like, as a whole, people are like waking up to a lot of stuff in their life.
Yeah, I
It,
definitely see
you
that.
know,
I think
yeah.
it's I think it was natural that like something like AI coming out, that's like so earth-shattering, earth-changing, or however you want to view it, is gonna take some time to digest, right? Like
Mm,
so let's say the last few years, people have taken the time to develop their own relationship with AI, develop their own thoughts on AI, what have you. And now I think people have had like 3 years of kind of just sitting with it, absorbing it, practicing, trying out different things that now people have their sort of well-established opinions of AI and what it can do for us. So
mm.
I think that's just the natural, like, the novelty. It's not like you don't know what you don't know. Now we have like 3 years of data, so to speak, speak to.
No, for sure. And I mean, I'd be curious to see what you're seeing on this, but one of the things that became very clear this year, and for people who don't know, I've been talking about it this year. I've been trying to cause a lot of fights, Brandon, in the newsletter
Oh, have you?
over the past couple months. Like, I'll go to write an article, I'm like, who do I really want to get in a fight with now? It's not what I think, but after I finish it, I'm like, oh boy, this is going to cause an argument. And I've been taking a lot of swings at AI because a lot of stuff's been coming out, both from leaks, from the performance of SpaceX. Like, we're seeing under the curtain of what's been going on since 2021 in these companies and in this whole new ecosystem that's supposed to be developing around this new technology. And very little of it is any good. One of the things that I covered, um, and I didn't outright predict, or I didn't go as far as to add a prediction of where SpaceX was going to go. I did like throw some general ideas out there, but I didn't say like this is my price target for it because I didn't know. I didn't know what was going to happen. The Elon Musk
Oh,
effect is powerful.
oh, they're going to Mars,
Um,
right? No, I'm kidding.
exactly. But as I dug through their S1, and as I was reading through it, very little of it made sense. There were all of these weird, like, self-dealing things written in the notes at the bottom. And I didn't know that I wouldn't have looked for them, except I went and I read the audit report um at the bottom of their S1 that they sent to the SEC. And the auditor kept like pointing at these different notes and saying like, "Oh, this note says this, but don't look at the man behind the curtain," kind of stuff. And so I went and looked, and I came to the conclusion, people can go read the article and see it. I didn't exactly hide my feelings, is that for years I and many other people have had the gut feeling that these companies are overhyped and that they're not nearly as good
Oh
as
yeah.
what as they say they are. And now that we have SpaceX's financials and someone leaked um, OpenAI's financials to Ed Zitron, the journalist, we now know how bad it is. Just to your point, it's like it's no longer it's
Some
no
sort of
longer
doubt around it. It's
yeah.
kind of clear.
It's very, very clear, and companies as well. Like, I mean, the big thing that was happening before SpaceX went public, the big thing happening there is all these companies were rolling back their AI spend. And no one
Which
in the news is talking about it. You see it very briefly every once in a while, but you have companies like Ford saying, "Oh yeah, we're hiring engineers again," or Klarna, who's the classic example, going, "We screwed up big time." And it's not the AI's fault. The AI is just it's a tool. It's a technology. It was
right. It
the
was the
people.
natural human overreaction to, whoa, this new thing that's going to change the world. Let's put
Yes,
in as much money as we can right away. Which,
yes,
yeah, that's what we were
yes.
both saying like a year ago or so, is that like the combined overhype with it, with the relative cheapness of AI, like we can use AI without really spending money. So it's like, where's the money really coming from? Those kind of
It
two
isn't.
things correlating with a lot of money in, with like not getting that much return from some of these AI companies. I
Mhm.
think we saw some of the writing on the wall that, this can only go so far.
Yes. And to be fair, for people who do watch this later, I'm sure, people are gonna push back and say like, oh, if these companies were like doing so poorly, then first off, where's your proof? And then second off, like, why are they trying to go public? Well, first answer, go read some of Ed Zitron's work. You can go read my article too if you want on what the financials actually look like. But number two is that people don't realize that this entire game has been floated on a sea of venture capital money and large institutional money that's been stuffed into these AI companies. The banks got involved, the financial institutions got involved. Um, and because of that, they basically never had to learn to be profitable. Seems to be at best. I'm trying to be very nice. My own personal opinions are probably quite a bit more critical, but bare minimum, people like Dario Amodei, people like Sam Altman, and these teams didn't have to learn to put their profits first because they had all of this investor money just being thrown at them that they were like, oh, we'll fix it eventually. Well, the problem is now you're almost $1 trillion into this. And when you look at the token prices and it quickly climbs to $1 million in a month, then that's when kind of the chickens are coming home to roost there. It's no longer a
Yeah.
case where they can go like, oh, it'll get cheaper in 6 months. They've been saying that for 3.5 years and it hasn't
Yeah.
arrived. And in the meantime, they've done, I think, large amounts of really painful damage to the economy that's going to take us a while to recover from, personally.
Most definitely. It kind of reminds me of like dot-com crash and kind of getting overhyped on like the internet back in the day,
Hmm.
overhyped on AI today, and then yeah, needing to pay the price when how's the saying go when the music stops, go until the music keeps
Yeah.
going.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, okay, wait. So you mentioned SpaceX, and I think that's
Yes.
I don't know if you were saying SpaceX's financials were good or bad, or kind of same with the starting to get a little overhyped or something. Was that the main?
Um, for me, they left a lot to be desired. So
Oh,
the two, I'll say this, the two positive things about SpaceX, and again, people can go read my article and see this. I put up the graphs. Currently, SpaceX spends more on R&D than all of their competitor averages, like pretty much across the board. I think the only one that spent more in terms of R&D was defense. I'd have to
that
go look at
seems
my graphs
natural
and
though.
see.
I mean, in terms of like space exploration, there's a lot of research and development that needs to go into that. So that seems like something that makes sense as like an investment. You put things
No,
in
yes.
for not the expectation that you'll get a return on said investment for like 10 years or so, or something like
No,
that.
yes. Absolutely. And that is exactly what you want to see from a space company. You want to see them pouring tons of dollars into R&D because R&D is what drives future earnings. And the other thing too is Elon Musk worked his magic yet again. Say what you want about him as a person or as like some people call him a grifter, whatever. He is a master of lean operations, and the data shows it. So if you go and you look at operating efficiency, right now SpaceX is lower on average than just about all of its competitors. We're talking space launches, low Earth orbit satellite arrays, satellite manufacturing, defense. Defense is lower than them because they just don't have defense companies don't really have a whole ton of overhead. They have a whole ton of actual cost of goods and cost of revenue as they're manufacturing these things, but they keep pretty lean operations. And then when you look
Okay, that
here was the number. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that makes sense. Just like like you don't. I don't think you get to like the position that Elon Musk is in by accident. You're definitely doing like
Hmm.
something right, but in terms of say Elon Musk situation, you have to achieve a lot over the course of your lifetime to get to that position. One of the reasons why I brought it up was because one of the main astrological highlights we've had of 2026 so far was the Venus Jupiter conjunction in Cancer in early June, and that was right
Mm.
around the time when Elon Musk was declared the first ever trillionaire, and Elon Musk is Cancer rising, I believe. So you kind of see how something like that sort of lands like that for someone like him. I think a lot of people were somewhat disappointed. I think a lot of astrologers overhyped Venus plus Jupiter being like, the two good planets coming together, everything's great. And then there was not a ton of like payoff. Only, I think it was only specific to like maybe Cancer placements that sort of felt
Mm.
the good vibes rolling. Although even Cancer placements were like, there's too much going on. This is like way too much for me. And yeah, there's quite a few reasons as to that. But that was one of the interesting astrology stories so far, at least correlations, was a
I
good transit like
mean,
that coincided with Musk being declared the first trillionaire.
yeah, which is so funny because now it's fallen so hard as we talk right now. SpaceX is officially underwater in terms of their equity raising, which leads into the bad, right? So the good is just to wrap that back around, and he does deserve flowers for this. He's a master at running really lean operations. He can come in and he can fix something up so that it's no longer like full of dead weight. And the guy has a view of the future. So of course they outspend absolutely everybody. Um, to quote my brother though, and this is something that I also heard other people like Brandon Dell and some other people say, Ed Zitron's another one. Um, he is so wealthy and he's been so successful because of things like PayPal and because of things like the Tesla battery. Um, he can afford to make a whole bunch of really stupid calls and not have his own fortune affected all that much. And that is what we saw. That is what I saw in the SpaceX IPO or S1, sorry. Something to the tune of, I actually have the chart here. I don't need to say it. So, two things I wanted to bring up here that I found when I was scrolling through everything that he brought up is that right now, something to the tune of 96% or somewhere around there of their total addressable market, which from everything I've learned so far, and maybe there's professional VCs and other groups who have a better grasp on this than me, no one ever gets their total addressable market. It doesn't happen. No one on earth takes the entire market. Other browsers exist, other smartphones exist,
Yeah,
other medical companies exist.
there's a good idea
Um,
to be had. There's always going to be competition.
Absolutely. And the second you get too big, there's going to be people smaller than you that are going to try and eat that extra market share from out from underneath you. But 93% of total TAM has to do with AI, which is absurd for a rocket company, just to begin with. It's even more absurd for a rocket company whose only profitable section is Starlink. SpaceX launches are not profitable. XAI is not profitable.
No, yeah, that
Starlink
has
is
to
the
do with
only one.
I mean, like where we're at as like society, and we're not like
Yeah.
you're not having that many people buy like a ticket to the moon, ticket to like space
Yes.
tourism. That's kind of the market that something like
Mhm.
SpaceX would get customers from or get money from. Um,
I mean, yes, and if we could like talk a little bit kind of future proofing, which I know a lot of people hate, but future proofing here. What will make SpaceX's rocket segment profitable, in my opinion, is space mining, space tourism, and megalithic construction. So being infrastructure for megalithic construction. We're decades away from interstellar tourism
Hence the
minimum,
R&D partially.
hence
Yeah, I
hence
mean,
the R&D.
well, I think just now you have more people in like call it like a survival mode way of being, where it's like you're just trying to cover the basics. You're not trying to like do the space tourism. Space tourism is something you do once you have like every other thing in your life at least like
Yep,
semi-stable, right?
absolutely. And that, to be fair, like the thing that will make that possible will be things like semi-permanent or permanent structures on the moon that are protected most of the time. So like when you start seeing like permanent dwellings on the moon, space hotels, that kind of stuff, you'll see that kick up a little bit more. But again, we're decades away from that. We're 50 years plus away from space mining. There's no machine AI models that I know of that are capable of handling that on their own without human involvement right now. And then we still have to get all the metals back, which is another challenge that we're probably decades away from. And of course, the biggest thing, which is would justify their TAM, is doing something like building a Dyson swarm, which is possible in the next 200 years. But you can't afford that now. We don't even have the technology to do it now.
Right.
So when you add that to the fact that from everything that I've seen, the idea of what's called radiant cooling, so what Elon Musk claims and what a lot of people claim. Hi, Mystic Spice. Someone said hello.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so what Elon Musk claims is that it's more efficient from a cooling perspective and a land use perspective to have constellations of data centers in space. There are some really big problems connected to that we don't have time to get into. But
Right.
one of the biggest issues, and is actually a non-starter for him, is the fact that oh, thank you, Mystic Spice.
Oh yeah. This is a friend of mine.
Nice,
So
very
thanks for
nice.
joining.
Well, welcome. Um, the biggest thing that they actually, I don't know if they brought this up in their S1. I'm sure they did. Is something called radiant cooling. So basically, the idea is that because space is so cold, you can throw data centers up there and it keeps them cool. It actually doesn't work because talking to people again, like my brother who studied heat transfer in college and other engineers, you need particles to make that work. Space doesn't have those, not a lot of them.
Right.
And
It
it's
solves the
actually
cooling
why,
problem, but there's other problems that come up that would then need to be solved.
well, it doesn't solve the cooling problem. So you need those particles to bring the heat away from the data centers, and you don't have those in space. They're really few and far between, which is why things like the ISS have massive banks of radiators attached to them. Because you can't just throw something into space and expect it to be cold. And so a lot, kind of my biggest takeaway from that when I was looking through their S1 is a lot of it is hype, the Elon Musk effect, and maybe potentially someday in the future we could have something that's pretty neat. That's
Right.
not worth $1 trillion to me.
Not
That's not
currently,
worth,
definitely.
well, it's also not worth the amount of money that you would need to justify their TAM inside their S1. It's also not worth, what was the number? Um, $28,000 from every single person on Earth making over $12,000 annually per year forever. That's what you need to justify a $28 trillion total addressable market.
Right.
And it's
And
just not going to happen.
that's nowhere close to where humanity's at right now.
Nowhere close. If in like the next 100 years, we get things like big space mining conglomerates and other really
Right.
large, insanely valuable companies, we're talking 10, $20 trillion valuation companies. Maybe. It's
Right.
not going to happen.
That's kind of the world and the reality where that makes more sense. So maybe
Yes.
let's pivot a little bit and talk about what are the biggest problems needing solved right now and in 2026. What were some of the other what were some of the other sort of economic highlights that you were seeing for 2026 and where we're at right now?
um no, sure. So I mean the biggest thing, so we had a couple of really big points, and then I actually want to drive away from the economics because there's some really cool stuff
Yeah.
outside of it. um we have not yet seen the effects of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz yet, and we're probably not going to see it till next year. Would be my guess. Minimum, because that's when the plants that were grown with the more expensive fertilizer are going to be being harvested, and food
Right.
prices are going to go up.
The sort of agricultural effect
Yes.
because right, the initial closure of like say gas prices going up and the kind of hitting like the gas sector was felt In terms of like the agricultural sector, that's more of
Mhm.
a lagging indicator, would you say?
Yeah, because and to quote, and I wish I knew his actual name. Blackbird Farms is the guy on YouTube. Go see his content; it's really cool. To quote him, the fertilizer that they paid a premium for is what was planted this spring, and so we're not going to see that until things are harvested next fall or this. Sorry, you'll probably actually now that I think about it, if it was planted this spring, you'll see some of it this fall, and then a lot next year. The other thing is too, we haven't really felt the effect of the gas prices either because people were burning down their reserves in the US this whole time, which I don't know why more companies didn't hedge their bets more. In other words, buying whatever oil at whatever price they could get it for throughout this whole time, laddering up, and then just buying like futures or something to offset it. But that's neither here nor there. So, our at least if you listen to specifically energy analysts in this country, our reserves are gone. And so those are also going to come to roost unless we really, really wrap this up quickly.
Yeah.
Because despite what everyone is saying right now about how the US is now going to be like the UAE in terms of everyone's coming to us for gas,
Yeah, I think there was a bit of a 3D, 4D, 5D chess move with taking over Venezuela and like that the oil reserves they have there.
a little bit, but it's going to be much more expensive.
Oh
And
yeah, most
so
definitely.
we're going to see that. And it's actually one of the things where I'm frustrated at Trump right now for many things, but that's one of the biggest ones is with how many things we're traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, this has turned into a very much Iran Iraq style conflict, 20-year conflict that's going to be real painful for us
Yeah,
moving
I
down
think
the
he
line.
was.
And
I think
go
you
ahead.
could say he was overestimating his ability to take over or conquer or whatever word you want to use on Iran, but then Iran was definitely well prepared to defend.
Mhm. The points that because actually I heard a geopolitical strategist talk about this on the Steve Eisman show. What she was saying is that it's called a decapitation strike, is what we've done both in Venezuela and we did it in Iran as well. So decapitation strikes, you fly in, you take out all the leadership in one go. And then supposedly it's supposed to fall, like the country's supposed to fall apart in theory. That worked in Venezuela. It did not work in Iran. Um, and from what this strategist was saying is because of how well Venezuela went, Trump thought we could do it again. The Iranian government's much more scattered and fragmented. There are many, many different ruling classes in that government. And so you take out the Ayatollah and you take out all the top leadership, you didn't actually end anything. You just turned it into a turf war. And so I mean, personally, I think he definitely overestimated that. And whoever gave him the intelligence that we could pull this off was either wrong or being deliberately deceptive. I don't know enough to know which one of those two it is, but I would be willing to bet it's one of them. And so we're gonna feel that. Right, like mark my words, we're gonna feel that over the next year or two as even even if the war ends tomorrow, we're gonna feel it for the next couple of years as that starts to shake out. So that was the biggest thing. And I don't want to like look at like everything being so depressing because I'm actually genuinely impressed with how markets and consumers are waking up to the fact that they've been fed a pipe dream over the past couple of years,
Yeah.
myself included. I was in that boat until very, very recently. So I'm impressed with that. It's just we've not seen the end of this train, in my opinion.
No, I think well yeah, there's a lot in the current astrology that suggests big awakenings here on the way in the process of unfolding. When you say fed a pipe dream and like waking up from that, what are you kind of speaking to?
Well, and this is going to connect to our next one that we wanted to talk about, which is FIFA. But
Oh yeah.
what was the overarching narrative that we had for the past couple of years? It was
Yeah.
just in general, and maybe I'm missing some stuff, but this is kind of the vibe that I was getting. The economy is good. The economy is strong. Even if it is like Trump came in, okay, it's starting to weaken, but Trump's going to fix it. AI is going to make our lives so much better. We're not going to have to work anymore, and we're just going to get paid UBI, and all going to be able to go make art and stuff like that.
Yeah. See, that
Um,
was definitely a pipe dream. I always saw through
that
that. I'm
yes,
like, UBI, like UBI is not. It could be a good fix for like what things are happening right now, but like, I don't like UBI as like a long term solution. And yeah, going back to the point you said about the economy's bad or inflation's bad, Trump's gonna fix it. Like a lot of astrologers were predicting that Kamala Harris would win that election because she had a few like astrological activations that was like, yo, what's going on with Kamala? Is she gonna like win this or something? And then I think a few astrologers maybe shied away from predictions because they thought Kamala was gonna win, said Kamala was gonna win, and then like a lot of people were like, what, you said Kamala was gonna win? What the hell happened? And I think that speaks to like economic issues were voters' number one issue in that election. And on
yes,
paper, Trump was definitely the better candidate to vote for if your biggest issue was the economy, which I told you before. I'm
yes,
always like, the economy, I always translate as like the cost of living crisis. I'm like, voters'
hmm
biggest issue was they can't afford to like live and their everyday expenses and things like that.
yes,
So
yes.
that pipe dream you're talking about of like Trump's gonna fix it and then has not fixed it, which I think we've talked about before. Like inflation is not really a fixable problem that any president is capable of solving. You could say Trump is doing some good things under the scene, under the in the background that could put us on a better trajectory decades later. But that's still not that payoff's like not gonna take time.
It's and you know, I hate to say it, I don't know if he necessarily is, and I don't know if any
Right, as you
president
were saying with the
could.
Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. And all
But
these
I mean, many, and we don't have time to talk about all this stuff. But like for example, one of the things that opened my eyes specifically about the cost of housing is that that is not a problem the federal government can fix, nor should it be, because that comes from local regulations being the issue. I have a friend. Well, first off, I heard it from people like Steve Eisman, from the CEO of Meritage Home, other people. And then I had a friend who went and did the research for himself out here in Utah. And one of the biggest issues here that we have is the fact that local regulation is voted for by homeowners. And that regulation, specifically, they vote for regulation that keeps their home values up under whatever guise that they choose to use, protecting the neighborhood, building safety, etc. It actually doesn't matter because the end goal is that Steve Sowell talks about this in his book, Housing Boom and Bust as well, that I recommend to anyone if they like reading this stuff, is that if you are someone who had a home before that new regulation went in place and it's either paid off or your interest rate is really low because there's less risks, your equity is going to go to the ceiling. And then you're going to spend a lot of the rest of your life justifying that and defending that. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. People should be proud of their homes. They should be able to enjoy that additional equity when it comes. But at the same time, you need to realize that part of the reason why home prices are as high as they are is because we can't do things like build row houses anymore. We can't do things like build quadplexes anymore or triplexes
yeah. Just simply
because
demand and supply. Too much
not
demand
even
chasing too
that.
little to supply.
It's not even that. It's the fact that regulation makes it so that local regulation makes it so that it becomes economically impossible to fill that demand. There is demand for smaller housing. I'm the classic use case for that. My wife and I would love to own a townhome, right? We don't build enough of them here to be able to make that affordable for us,
Right.
and
Limited supply or too little supply. Like you're saying the
are
regulation contributing to not enough supply.
are artificially restricting the supply beyond what free markets would provide.
Yeah.
So the way that Soul describes it is if you compare like Chicago to San Diego, which is the example he uses in the book, the price of land, or sorry, the price of building materials isn't that different. It is now, after COVID and after the spending and all that that's occurred, and after the tariffs, et cetera. But for most of US history, the building materials were the same. There wasn't really that big of a difference in price. What was different was the price of the land, which is directly correlated with the regulations in place that are like number of parking spaces. Can you sublet or not? Can you build multiple buildings or not? How high can your building be? All of that brings up the cost because now you have to sit through meeting after meeting and review after review, all of which gets passed on to the home buyer. So there is, this goes back to that point of what I was trying to make is like, I don't know if any president can fix it because we have a solution for that from the federal level. I don't know how effective it would be, but Steve Eisman has been preaching this for years. It's like, if you want homes to be more affordable, federal government, tie federal housing assistance for each state, those dollars that they're allocated, tie that directly to bringing home prices down, and home prices will fall because state regulators will come in and say, okay, we need to cut these regulations so that the tap doesn't get turned off. But no one's willing to do that because it'd be political suicide. And so I don't know if it is a problem that a president can fix. Something short of maybe if we got like a real Georgist that got elected, which would probably never happen in America. If we got someone who was really into Georgism, maybe, maybe. But that's actually part of the awakening that I've been describing is people are starting to realize both on the right and the left that they're like, we can't trust either of these people. We can't trust and we're going to get to this in just a second, but you want to know what the number one response or the number one like vibe and response I was feeling when I was watching these people coming to the US to see their country's team compete in the US was? The number one vibe that every single one of their videos brought across was, "Oh my gosh, America's so great. It's so much fun. Like, do you even know how cool ranch is?" Like stuff like those were the comments, which is going to be followed when they go back to Europe or to wherever they were from to go, okay, then why did my government spend so long telling me this country was terrible? That may not happen in Asia, but that's definitely going to happen in Europe. And so I, I think you lost your volume. I can't hear you. But
You can't
long
hear?
story short, oh, you're back. You're back.
Okay.
What were you saying there?
What was I saying? Oh, right. So yeah. So talking about the World Cup that we want to talk about, and are you specifically talking about like Europeans that kind of came over?
Yes.
Kind of compared differences between European culture and American culture.
Hmm. Yeah. And
Um,
well, it was really, and maybe this wasn't everyone's opinion. Obviously, I should be careful making blanket statements, but a lot of people, especially like social media groups and people who are posting on their own accounts when they came here, they
yeah,
loved
there was
it
a lot of
here.
those. Yeah.
Wherever they went, they loved it. What was it like? The Scottish or the Irish drunk Dallas out of whiskey or some crazy nonsense like that,
Yeah, that was crazy. A lot of
and
British
everyone in
people robbing
Dallas,
Walmart or something.
exactly. And Dallas was like, "This is the most fun weekend we've ever had," which I'm so grateful for. Like that's so good for the world to have these kind of moments of where people can go to another country and go, "Oh my gosh, like these people are awesome."
Oh yeah,
More of
yeah.
that energy, please.
I
But
mean, that's how we come together as people,
yeah,
seeing different sides of humanity and across the globe.
no, 100%. It's just the other shoe. And maybe I could be wrong here, but I think the other shoe is going to fall where people who are more self aware are going to return home and they're going to see the propaganda that their governments have been putting out about these other places. And they're going to go, I was just there and that's not true.
Okay,
That I,
so the
I
veil is starting to come down.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see what like you're seeing in the whole on the astrological side, because for me it's going from everyone's waking up to the other shoe is going to fall. And when it does, stand back and duck.
Well, it's kind of interesting because one of the things we had go on this year is that Uranus entered Gemini, which is historically a tough time for the United States. I once kind of correlated with like the hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times cycle. But it's interesting. That's a signature that goes back to the birth chart of the United States and the American Revolutionary War. Uranus goes around the whole zodiac, and that's like around the sun every 84 years. So next time that happened was the Civil War. The next time that happened was the World War II, and now we're kind of back at that. One of the things that happened earlier this month was at July 4th, Mars conjoined Uranus, and that's kind of a lot of fireworks. Of a lot of things can go wrong. I think that was probably the single day in 2026 for me as an astrologer that gave me the most pause. Um, there were a lot of ways that could have gone wrong. Thankfully, it wasn't as bad as like some people thought it could be, or might be. Um, but it's interesting. It is typically a hard time for the United States. But if you think about the examples of each of those, say like the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, we fought a war, but the kind of cause and result was that we ended slavery in the Civil War. In the case of the Revolutionary War, started a new country. So like what Uranus does, it does with the ultimate end goal of freedom. It can be like messy and chaotic in the process, but it is ultimately like for our highest good, if you want to look at it like that. Now that's ongoing from like now through like 2032. I
Mm.
think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic in 2032 because that's when Saturn will conjoin Uranus, kind of, which I think is like a cool hybrid of like tradition. Saturn's planet of the tradition and rules and sort of authority with government, and Uranus is sort of the opposite, the planet of like of breakthrough, of rebelling, of freedom. Um, so to me, it sort of looks like the new world fully coming like online. You kind of have the mesh with like the old world and the new world. Right now, we're in sort of the talking about the awakening, and there's a lot of 2026's astrology that looks like new worlds being created, new worlds being born. But if you think about the process of like birth, that's a painful process. So it's like, yes, new worlds are being created, old world is falling apart, but the transition is definitely messy, painful, however you want to describe it. I definitely think there's reason to be optimistic going long term, but you know, there's some hardship to get through in the meantime. So what were your
Yep.
thoughts on the other shoe dropping?
It was more just that comment of like what happens when people realize that they've been lied to.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, cuz and I don't know enough about psychology to understand this, but you can see from experience, especially if you talk to someone who's been in like an abusive relationship or a deceptive relationship, they go through kind of the stages of grief. And eventually, depending on how bad it was, they either end up in a place of like acceptance or they really start looking for redress of grievances. And in that moment is when you need to duck, you know. But the other thing that comes to mind too, now that I'm thinking about it, as I've learned more about like US history, US financial history, just an interesting kind of coincidence that comes up when you say that about like after each war is when this cycle completes. After each war is also when some of our biggest institutions are formed, and the ones
exactly.
that led to insane compounding economic growth over decades and hundreds of years. You know, after the Civil War, we wrote the Declaration of Independence and Constitution. It was
That's
one of the,
the
it's
Revolutionary War.
revolutionary. War. Yes. After the Civil War is when we started to do things like, you know, create. I can't remember exactly what it was. I read Mark Hagan's book about this. I'm trying to remember what he said. Um, but it was things around Reconstruction. Anyway, obviously that's not coming to
Yeah,
mind. And then
Reconstruction.
After World War One, we built the League of Nations, which even though it was a bit of a failure, it was like laying the groundwork for the UN and the IMF, which came after that, after World War
World
II.
War II. And the
That
creation of the Bretton Woods system, aiming the US dollars, global reserve currency. Yeah, there's a big financial tie-in with Uranus and
mhm.
Gemini.
And say what you will about the Bretton Woods system. I know you and I have both criticized it pretty heavily for very good reasons, I think. Um,
Okay.
it led to the longest period of economic growth we've ever seen across the globe. We
Yeah,
we did we freed people from abject poverty faster than anyone expected. And it was in part because you built these
we did.
institutions where you can use your credit card anywhere and
Right.
where
But
countries
that's
do
kind of
not
the thing
have
is that
to.
but that was part of the thing is a lot of it was built on debt. It was built on like borrowing today
Yes.
at the cost to be paid a generation later. And so I think that's kind
Yes.
of where we're at, part of where we're at now in terms of the other shoe dropping of like you borrowed money to escape poverty, but like you just kept borrowing money every time you needed to like pay the loan back, so to speak. So that's part of like that sort of vicious debt cycle that we got in. I think one
Mhm.
of the biggest issues in the world right now is the concept of like debt slavery. If we're comparing like Uranus and Gemini cycle to something like past wars and something like the Civil War and freeing slavery, I think you could say as well as the like the financial tie-in that Uranus and Gemini has, there's an argument to be made about like debt slavery being one of the biggest problems in the world.
No, absolutely. And that's an issue where we've talked about this before. To put the whole death of the US dollar to bed, I think. Because for better or for worse, everyone is in that position right now. The EU, Germany, Russia, China, all Japan, pretty much every country on earth right now, every first world country is up to their eyeballs in debt.
Well, because it's all connected. The Bretton Woods system tied
Yeah,
every currency in the world together. So it's like they sink or
no,
swim as a
absolutely.
group. US is,
Yeah,
the gold reserve currency, but they're all still linked.
no, absolutely. And I think, I hate to say it, as much as I wish this wasn't true, I think that was part of the reason why after the whole Bitcoin unwind in 2025, why it hasn't really healed, even though a lot of crypto analysts say it should, is because financial professionals. Well, first off, you had the rise of option trade of um, prediction markets, so everyone switched. All the speculators switched from crypto to gambling and AI. That's what they did.
Right, which
But
is
also,
full gambling culture.
absolutely, 100%, absolutely. The other thing too, though, is if we blow up, everyone blows up with us. And I hate that we're in that position. I really wish we'd have someone who'd be willing to enforce austerity measures in the US and be willing to like put us on a path towards fiscal well-being. But at the bare minimum, it's like BRICS is not going to replace the US dollar because they're worse off than we are.
Yeah, I don't like
And
BRICS as a
so,
replacement. But when you say put the death of the US dollar to bed, like you don't think the US dollar will quote unquote die this
not
century, the next few decades or something like that?
definitely not the next few decades. We can't possibly predict what's going to happen more
Right,
than
right.
10 or 20 years down the road. But everything is so interconnected right now and everyone depends so heavily on treasuries around the globe.
Right,
They
right.
depend on that borrowed money. We saw it. Actually, one of the things is the Bitcoin unwind showed us what happens in real time when that music stops.
The Bitcoin unwind. I still don't not fully unwind just because I've seen, Bitcoin does its 4-year cycle thing. It goes up, it goes
Mm.
down, and then it goes up again. So it's like I see it as the Bitcoin bear market. But I still think the bull market will come at some point. But when you say unwind,
What I mean is, and this is one of those things where it was one of the things that I discovered. So I was doing analysis after everything happened with the crypto market where it crashed, right? And aside from all of the gamblers leaving, one of the things that came up over and over again is that perpetual futures and other derivative contracts, which that's a lot of financial lingo, instruments and and assets built on top of crypto.
yeah,
It's it
finance
for
coming to Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. For people who are really not familiar, um, there is something in the financial world called a derivative. It's something that moves based on how well something else moves. And that's exactly what all of your prediction market events are. They're called event contracts. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. One of the things that came out in the wash after the huge drops we saw late 2025, first part of 2026 was that so many of these perpetual future contracts and other derivatives on Bitcoin were levered up to their eyeballs. We're
Yeah, it's
talking
gambling
anywhere
culture.
between 2 to 500 times leverage, which meant if Bitcoin dropped 20%, everyone gets wiped out.
Right. And that kind of is part of like the volatility that Bitcoin
Mm.
and crypto have had over the years.
Yeah, yeah,
And so
absolutely.
you
And it
so you're saying a
happens.
lot of the so you're saying a lot of the unwind like is part of is are you saying part of like speculators and gambling culture sort of leaving crypto and now going into like prediction markets?
Yes, so that was happening, but also the people who really get hurt in these really big like bull runs, it's not really the retail guys, though the retail guys can lose hard. It's the people selling levered products. So if you have someone that makes like a levered ETF, for example, or you have someone who is a trading fund that takes out borrows a whole bunch of money to buy Bitcoin or a whole bunch of money to buy
Right.
Nvidia,
Just adding debt to the
when the
equation. And debt gets you in trouble.
exactly, because as we've said before, that money doesn't exist. It doesn't exist until it's paid back. And so if the price falls, vanish. And so that was one of the big things I saw, and I kept trying to say to people because I had professors and other things like really patting themselves on the back saying, "We told you the crypto's a fraud." Um, that I was like, it isn't that simple. Like we had this massive unwind in leverage. People had taken out really unsafe levels of debt against their Bitcoin and against their crypto assets,
Yeah, a lot of
and that's
greed
what
going on
caused
there.
it to be such a big wipeout. It was the same thing with 2008. It was the same thing
Yeah.
with 2001. It's going to be the same thing with AI. People will build these levered products so that they can turn their 10% return into a 100% return. And it works well until it doesn't. So that's what I meant when I said the unwind is
Okay, okay.
there will
Nice.
come a point. Sorry, go ahead. Finish your shit.
No, no, I'm just saying. Okay, I see where you're coming from now.
Yeah. And it'll come for AI as well. There will come a point when the unwind will happen and all of these levered like SanDisk ETFs where it's just one stock and a whole bunch of debt are going to be wiped out as it should be. In a free market, we don't save those people. In a free market, we let the most efficient and the most competent people survive.
Right. The free market, like I think we might have talked about at one point or another, like it's not really capitalism when it's not really like free markets. It's like there's too much like government intervention that's like too many like almost call it like too many cooks in the kitchen or like too many hands
Yeah,
controlling the thing. Something that you
100%.
said maybe like I think you said maybe like 10 minutes ago that made me think of something. I forget what it was. Oh, I think it was kind of the awakening of like what do you do when people realize government's been lying to them. I think one thing that made me think of was the planet Saturn. Planet Saturn can symbolize government because it symbolizes authority and rules and stuff like that. It's an interesting time now compared to 2020 because right now Saturn is in the sign of Aries, which is hard for Saturn. So right now it's like government's sort of losing authority, and I think that's part of what's coinciding with people awakening. Contrast that with a year like 2020. Saturn was in its home sign of Aquarius. That is a sign where Saturn has all of its resources to do what it needs to do. So essentially, like Saturn's in good position means like government authorities in good position. I think the bigger story of like 2020 isn't really like the COVID pandemic, but it's the government's response to it of like we're gonna shut down the whole world. Like that was probably the more unprecedented part of 2020. If you think about like flus and epidemics and pandemics have happened before, but to shut down the entire world was kind of like a flex on the part of the government. So
Hmm.
compare that with right now when you have a planet like Saturn in a bit of a harder sign government authority doesn't have as much power as it normally has, or would otherwise had, or had back in 2020. So now I think that's kind of coinciding with what you're saying, like the say power to the people, but coinciding with the government's having being in a weaker position overall.
Mhm.
That's kind of one of the
They did.
themes of awakenings going on.
No, absolutely, and that's a fair point. Is one of the big lessons that we can definitely take away from COVID and the start of the 2020s is the governments of the OECD countries really spent their social capital. And personally, I think that that's probably one of the underlying reasons why we're seeing a rise in populism now, both on the right and on the left, is because
Well,
they
people are fed up with government.
they're fed up. The government went for broke and they lost. And so now part of that awakening cycle, like you said, is people are now going, wait, what do you actually do for me? You know,
Exactly.
which is a good thing. We should start thinking like that more often. We should really start going
Yeah.
to these people and going, I give you my money, you work for me. What are you doing for me? Get away from fighting each other and point the blame where it belongs.
100%. And yeah, that's part of what makes me think of, well, I know, it's just kind of interesting because you were talking about like Europeans are seeing America in like a better
Mm.
light. And I'm like, is America doing well? Like, I'm like, is America really like in a place to thrive, or is it like the Uranus, just the Uranus and Gemini history? Like, I guess it could be like um short term like problematic. U.S. has weathered it, survived it on a number of times now, but and not that like a war conflict has to break out, but kind of just looking at the historic patterns, there's bumpiness, but it's the bumpiness that leads to growth. So I
Yes.
guess I don't know what to think. It's like is 250 about where we're gonna get to and like the fall of America is coming, or is this another like just pivoting, transforming? um, Definitely changes in store. I think the one thing that we know for sure is change is here. A lot is changing, and the rate of change is speeding up.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And I hate that I keep joking with my family and friends. It's like I sound more like I'm on the left every single day, and it's really not the case. You know, the ideological bent has shifted to the MAGA movement. And so it's like all the crazy stuff that was happening under Biden's administration on the left is now sort of shifting back the other way. Um, One of the things I would say, just like as a takeaway, that I think, like, if we were going to give people advice, obviously not financial advice, but advice for just life, now would definitely be the time to start doing things like reading the platforms that people running in your elections are running on. And now would definitely be the time, if you can afford it, to do things like attend government meetings, city hall meetings, vote both with your
Hmm.
vote and your dollar.
Vote with your dollar.
Now's the time to do that.
I
We're
suppose.
in this world now where we have the chance to fix things, and people
Right.
seemingly as a whole are shifting away from fighting each other and starting to shift towards realizing they're moving towards the same goal. And
Yeah.
we should really leverage that while we can, because I don't know how long it's going to last.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts there. So one of the things talking about 2026 is like everything is changing. Even like say like the 2020s decade. So much is changing with the world, right? I view that as empowering, as like in a year, decade, etc., when so much is changing, it means your actions do have like bigger effects than they otherwise would. Like if you think of like a time traveler, it's like this would be like one of those flashpoints where like so much happens. So it's like the slightest thing can completely alter your life trajectory. And like I find that empowering. I don't know about you. And then another thought I had was when Pluto first went into Aquarius, which was like 2023 or so. One of the things I said about what Pluto in Aquarius is about is the realization that it's not red versus blue. It's the people versus the establishment. And so what you're talking about, kind of people coming together, people not fighting each other, and kind of taking the fight to the establishment. I think that's a big thing that we're also starting to see, and will continue to see, especially as Pluto continues to be highlighted this year, this month, and into the future. Because yeah, Pluto and
Hmm.
it's going to be in Aquarius till like 2044, so
Yeah.
plenty more time to work through that.
No, yeah. And that actually resonates with what we're experiencing right now from a geopolitical front. What people need to realize is these governments are not fascist or communist. Sure, we have some of those. Even in the US, in the EU, like we have those parties. A lot of what we're experiencing is populism. And populism is the government of the people, run by the people, is really what it narrows down to. And, I think we've said this before. Nietzsche mentions that this appears when people are very upset and it
Yeah.
runs for a while. It's not very, depending on who you talk to, it's not very good at stable rule long term because a lot of
Uh,
populists run on these really emotionally charged platforms.
no.
They always seem to have an enemy. There's lots of stuff like that. But at the bare minimum, it shows that like you said, it's the weakening of established forces. And that's the time where you want to go, no, now's our moment. I'm not talking about violent rebellion, but is
Right.
now is the time where it's like it's time for us as the people to reach into these institutions and redeem them. Because I think some of them definitely need to be.
Absolutely. And one last thought I had was that as we're still in Cancer season, we're just about to finish. We have like a week left of like a Mercury retrograde in Cancer. I think Cancer is a lot about. I think in just in general too. This Mercury retrograde has been very tiring. I think there's a lot of people talking about. Well, there's so much big astrology in July. I posted the other day on Threads. I was like, there's so much happening right now, but like Mercury is retrograde. It is Cancer season. That is a time. Mercury retrograde is a slowdown no matter what you do. Cancer season is a time to honor your peace, honor your nervous system. Like, do what you need to do to sort of shield yourself or like guard your own energy from like everything that's happened and just kind of honor your own energy system. We're moving into Leo season next week, which is going to be a bit more, call it loud and proud, a little more energized, a little more fun in the sun. And Mercury is going to go direct, so that'll help speed things up. Because I talked about the overall change, right? I talked about change and transformation can look a lot of different ways. Something
Mm-hmm.
like Cancer season can look a little more like cocooning. A caterpillar going into a cocoon to become a butterfly is one of the most beautiful transformations we see in nature. So it's like growth doesn't
Right.
have to be so outward and so energetic. I think maybe like fire and air does represent that, which there's a lot of fire and air going on this month, this year. But there's also a lot of water going on, which is about the internal and the more feminine mode. So there's something about honoring your energy, but also coming together as people. And those are all ingredients to how we move forward as individuals and as a collective.
No, I agree. I think that's a good place to stop because we are over time. But thank you again,
Indeed.
Brandon, for coming on and hopping on. It's always fun to talk. And the number of times where you say things that then turn out to be true is spooky. So we have
I
that to
know you
look
were like
forward
you,
to.
you had a comment like we can't predict 10 years from now, and I'm like, I know in 2032 Saturn's going to conjoin Uranus. I know. I'm like, there's a few things. I'm like, I can know the vibe of something, but no, yeah, I know what you mean. But no, thanks as well. It's a pleasure, and dude, always a good
Yeah.
time to get two Gemini's on a call together and just Gemini it out.
Absolutely. Thank you all for coming to our little corner of the internet today. For a little bit of house cleaning, everyone, this show will appear both on the Wealth and Wisdom Substack. It will appear on the Awakened Astrology Substack. It will appear on Wealth and Wisdom at YouTube. And there will be shorts coming out of those as well. I got to send those to you sometime. You probably get them yourself, so you probably don't need mine. But
I believe so. Yeah.
so keep an eye out for those. Um, it was a pleasure talking to everyone. Thank you, everyone. We will see you all next time. Bye now.
Wonderful. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good day. Good month.